you can't think of the design process as like a one and done. You have to see it as different phases. And the first phase is just inspiration. What are the things that I'm inspired by, and how can I build a system around that?
Welcome to the Talking AI podcast, where we talk AI with both experts in the field and early adopters. I'm your host, Matt Paige, and we're here to demystify AI for you so you can get some value from it. Let's talk some AI. We type because that's what computers required from us, but it was never natural. It was just the way we always did it. Humans are wired to talk. We speak 5 times faster than we type, and AI's finally made voice good enough that you don't have to go back and fix everything. And this is driving a massive shift where people are moving from typing to talking as the default with their machines. And once you make that switch, typing just feels broken. There's no better way to put it. But today I got Thomas Schlossmacher, who is one of the best individuals to talk about this shift because he's building Resonant, a voice dictation tool for Mac that runs entirely on your device, and nothing ever goes to the cloud. And dictation is just the starting point for what he's building. But welcome to the show, Thomas.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be a great conversation. I've been wanting to talk about this because the podcast name is Talking AI. So what's more fitting than talking about Talking AI on Talking AI? But to be honest, I use voice dictation here and there, but recently I'd say, I don't know, maybe 3 months ago or so, I just completely made the shift. And like if I'm ever in a quiet space, a Starbucks or something like that, I get angry if I have to type. Like it's like a visceral reaction to typing now. But why do you think talking to our machines has taken off in the way it has recently? Like what's driving this change?
I think it comes down to people kind of getting frustrated with typing. So I notice whenever I use any kind of AI application, I usually want to be fairly precise about what I'm actually putting into the chat or telling to a specific agent. And I have to make sure that I include images, I put in all these minor details. And if you think about how quickly you can speak, it's just so much easier. And your train of thought runs pretty effortlessly when you speak. But when you're typing, you're actually utilizing an entirely different part of your brain to kind of synthesize your thoughts and then bring them into chat. So it's really easy to just speak to the computer and have this kind of natural interaction where you can put so much context and so much messaging in just a few short seconds.
It's interesting you mentioned that because like you can feel the difference. Like if I'm typing something versus the output of me talking to whatever tool it is, I literally think about what I'm saying differently and the output's different. And for me, I don't know if this was for you, but like I had to make that shift of like being okay with the messiness that came out of me just having like a flow of conversation. But it's more nuanced though, I think is one thing. But the AI models are so good nowadays. Forget about dictation, just like being able to take in your natural language through a chat and have a conversation with it. But like, what was do you like remember a moment where you actually made that shift to talking versus typing? Like, did you have any kind of that weird adoption pain, I guess, as others do?
I think I'm similar to you. So like I do a lot of dictation on my phone and I find I don't do voice messages, but I'll use the Apple dictation. So I've been very comfortable just expressing myself through my voice. And when I'm in a public place and I have to do the voice thing and like click the button and kind of speak to my computer, I feel a bit weird about it, but I've been doing it for quite a long time. And I don't know where I picked it up. Like I'd seen my doctor and my dad, friends do it, but actually talking to my computer and utilizing different tools like Whisperflow, Voice from Aqua Voice, Willow, like I tried them all out. And it must have been maybe 2 years ago, but I don't know if there was a specific moment that I recall.
Yeah, just a gradual transition. So that's actually a good transition point. Like you mentioned Whisperflow and several other tools. Like Whisperflow is taking off like wildfire. So like the obvious question is, okay, why build Resonant when it's a voice dictation tool? Like what was your thought process in determining I want to build, voice dictation, and how are you thinking about it, I guess, differently than Whisperflow? Because in today's age, like anybody can build anything. So it's just an interesting topic, I think, when getting into deciding what to build and how do you approach different.
Quick break in the pod. Our State of AI 2026 report just dropped, and it breaks down what actually is changing in AI, what's hype, and what leaders need to be paying attention to this year. You can grab it right now on our show notes or at hatchworks.com.
And whatnot.
Yeah, I have a few answers. They have an incredible product. I have so much more respect for like their team and what they've built after I tried to do everything locally on device. Originally, my thinking was like I've used a few of these tools and I've built a couple of things. I know and I feel that there's this point coming where voice and agents will kind of come together. And you have like customer support agents, you have interview agents. There's all these different types. And I felt like I want something that's private because I know that these companies are also training models based on users who are using their applications. And I've given a lot of support to the Proton organization in Switzerland because I like that they use this zero data retention policy. And I wanted to do the same thing, but for a voice tool because I use it in my chat apps, I use it in my messages, my emails, everywhere. And I also don't want to be trained on, and I want to give people the same opportunity. So the thinking was, how can I make something that's like nice and for me, and also make something that is privacy focused so that people who may have, I don't know, sensitive client information or who have context data on screen that Apple can run OCR on that doesn't get uploaded to Whisperflow or one of these other organization servers. Like there's a lot of sensitivity around it. And I think more and more companies will, or more and more people will try and do more on device as the hardware improves. So that was kind of the thinking. And in terms of like people who can build anything, I've seen it like maybe half a dozen of these. Like I just created an alternative to Whisperflow and then people upload an open source project and then never touch it again. Yeah, that was kind of the early thinking. And now I'm just trying to make a really nice experience with the people who use it. So.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Like was prepping for this podcast and I looked at that on Whisperflow, which I guess should have been obvious, but like everything's done through the cloud, right? Even though it's a desktop application. So it is this interesting like nuance around privacy. And I feel like there's a lot of people that either don't care about that now or they're hyper vigilant of it. But I think it's going to become more and more important as time goes on and the implications of that start to rear their head. But I think the other part of it too is running LLMs locally is just going to get more and more efficient. I think was it Quinn that just came out recently that's running a model on device and it's just highly performant. So I think that is a future way of working in a sense as well, where LLMs are running locally. I'm curious your thoughts there on like the progression toward that. And is there a tipping point or are we already there to where running LLMs locally are good enough?
So good question. I've been wrestling with this the last maybe 3 weeks. So I have a M4 MacBook Air and it's good enough for like some small models that have been quantized. So like I can run them, but the tokens per second are slow. And because the models are smaller, so they can run on this device, they're not as high quality in terms of their answers. So I recognize that for the actual pipeline, like if you're doing an application like Resonant, you have to take in the text, which means having a speech-to-text model. Then you have to format it to make it look nice and kind of be adapted towards you. And then you need to post-process it. So you actually need to run it through a language model to say, hey, this is going to be an email, use this particular tone. And to do all of that in a compressed time period under 1 second and be highly accurate, unless you have a great setup, it's going to be hard to do. And that's why doing it kind of off device and doing it on a server is more effective. But then there's inference costs, which you have to also think about, and then your data, which you have to also think about. So I don't think we're there yet, but if you have a good device, like an ultra maxed out kind of MacBook, or you have a studio or like one of the newer models, or even like some GPUs on a local Wi-Fi server, you could have an amazing setup and do everything locally with Ollama or LM Studio. But to get like the majority of people who have a typical MacBook or who maybe even are on a Windows device, I'm not sure about any of their local language model optimization, but those are completely different scenarios. So in that case, it might be better to do things on a server. But then you run into the question of companies who use the product and do they want their data leaving? So it's kind of this tricky in between. But I think the next models of laptops that come out over the next 1 to 2 years are going to be great.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think it's where it's going. It's just a matter of time, it almost feels like. But on the point of like differentiation and existing products out there, like I think so many people, they see something that exists and they're like, oh man, well, that's already out there.
Cooked.
I'm just not even going to try. Right. Which just isn't the case anymore. And I think there's a couple elements. I'm curious your take. Like, I think the actual act of building that used to be defensible in and of itself because you needed like deep engineering expertise, and that's going away because anybody can build anything. Yes, if you're an engineer, you're, more likely to build something that's performant and secure and all that. But the models are getting so good when it comes to building now. What is the value point now? There's talk of taste, there's talk of brand, audience, all of these things. How are those elevating around in this new age that we're like moving into now?
I think maybe a couple of years ago, you could release something that was like half baked. And people would say like, oh, I see where this is going. I'll sign up. I'll go in for the ride. But now, because everybody can create anything and make something look nice using skills or screenshots, you really only get like 1, maybe 2 chances with an AI product. And if you don't win someone over in those like first 2 interactions, they're pretty much gone. Like people churn so fast and they jump between even models or companies really fast. And I think that makes it difficult for builders. So there has to be like a heavy emphasis on taste, which is one of them that's been pretty common, where you create this, you use this potential that you can now build or reference anything to create these highly unique or individualized creations that make this like new experience. So I would say taste is definitely one of the winning factors. Second to that would probably be capability. So recently, Perplexity released this computer product. And if you look at the product, it combined the browser that they have, Comet. They added voice capabilities so that you can speak back and forth for speech to text, text to speech. And they created this structure with OpenClaw. So you have this combined modality, which is also something that impresses people. But the number of creations like that are dwindling. And you only have so much before everything is kind of this super mixed modality AI experience, where when that point hits, I don't really know how you stand out because everything becomes this computer. So I think it's hard. You have to really put a lot of effort into refining the product and the visuals and the brand of what you're building and not focus so much on just like, hey, I built this quick thing. I mean, that can still work if you're famous, right? Like if you're Karpathy or somebody and you just drop a half-baked thing, people see it, but that's the innovation. That's not just like the product.
Yeah.
And
that's where that audience piece comes in, interestingly enough. But like, I'm actually curious, like maybe even pull up Resonant and even just looking at
sure.
the homepage of it, because you're a solo founder, you're bootstrapped doing this alone right now, but it's just beautifully done. It's just mind blowing that, somebody can create this by themselves in the amount of time that you did. I'd be curious, like, what was your approach to actually thinking through the brand, the design, the experience, which I think is such an important part with a product like this?
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to show you. So this is the site. I actually can't take full credit from this. So I built it all myself, yes, but artists steal is kind of the famous line. And I really respect the design taste from the Cursor team. And if you look at the site, it's very similar. So they have this light beige background. They created these, or I think they took these public works for these references of artistic works, which are very different to these like hyper digital experiences. But they focused on this cleanliness. And I thought, okay, from a website positioning standpoint, how can I create something equally as clean that also allows people to kind of immerse themselves and think about, oh, this is what it's like using the product. So the instant thing that you show is kind of that first touch. And then this video, I created a logo, like something that sits on screen. I'm not sure if you can hear it, but I'll play it.
Yeah, the audio is not coming through, but it has this cool like ambient vibe to it. And this is essentially the resonance, like, you know, talking, you're engaging with it, and it kind of has that ambient vibe to it. It's very, very
it's
cool, I guess is the way to describe it.
It's like this startup noise that I synced with the animation. And a lot of the design, let me just see how I can switch. I can take you briefly into what that looks like.
And while you're doing that, you mentioned the artist steal type of thing. So my new hobby is just building things on the side. Like I used to do other things. Now it's just that. And I literally was building something the other day and I was like, I'm going to go take Thomas's thing and say, hey, this is a good reference for the design I want. And I literally took a full screenshot of Resonant and fed that in as context.
I love that.
It's a great point actually, when you're thinking about, you know, what elements do you like of something when you're building something else? And that's like great context.
Yeah,
when you're building.
It's become a lot like Legos. And I've put a lot of effort into refining my own skills, both in terms of like skills like MD files, but also thinking of taste as a muscle that you can train. And this Resonant app was originally called Charlie. And I saw like different pieces of components that people had made on Pinterest. And I started to just bundle them into a board so that I could kind of mood board the whole thing and then pick out the pieces that I really liked. And I mean, these are all done by like professional designers who are refining their craft for maybe a decade. So you can see some of the vibe behind what I wanted and then what I built. I would say that whenever you're building something, if you start with a design system, you can just fly through. But if you've already got something and you're trying to like reorient it back into some new direction, it's not going to go well. So I would say,
how do you think about building that design system up front? Because it's not done in the traditional sense of how we used to build design systems in a lot of ways. Because you're almost having whatever tool you're using, you know, Cursor, Cloud Code, Lovable, you're giving it context to help build out the design system. How do you like tactically do that in this new like age of building?
Sure. So I have 3 primary points of inspiration. The first is on Twitter or X. The second is on Pinterest. And then the third is based on what I see released into the wild on like Hacker News or Between Friends or whatever I see like on the internet. And I learned this from my former co-founder. You can't think of the design process as like a one and done. You have to see it as different phases. And the first phase is just inspiration. What are the things that I'm inspired by? And how can I build a system around that? And building that system, I use ShadCN primarily for the actual design components. And then I work on each one until it like feels right. And then I'll do a pass with a skill that I made that looks at things like visual harmony, white space, using an 8-point grid system, type scaling. So like a lot of the standards that a designer might use. And I'll ask it, like when I hire someone through an AI chat, I'll ask the AI chat, like, behave like you work for Apple and Vercel. What are some of the frameworks, methodologies, and like techniques that you would use? And I want you to reason through them and apply them to this set of components, or make a design library, or, along those lines. And by pulling the LLM into this thinking of, oh, I have this role, oh, I have this like world knowledge of techniques and different frameworks I'm going to use, that makes the output so much more effective. And I'm actually like just amazed at some of the results that I get. So doing it like that has been really helpful. And then I follow a lot of designers. So I categorize on Twitter into bookmarks. I have a folder of design items that I really like. And I'm just constantly logging them, trying to train this ability to see things and then just recreate them. And that's kind of how it's been.
And then you naturally start to figure out your own patterns and your own taste through all of this absorbing of things, right? That's interesting. So you're leveraging skills in a sense, and maybe there's something going in a markdown file somewhere that has context. So as it continues to build, it has this reference of, okay, anything that I build needs to follow this design system or patterns that the human and the AI have aligned on effectively.
Yeah, I pointed back. So anytime I have a bit of a hiccup or I feel like something's not working, I'll just say reference the design log or the design library that we have in this code base. Or I'll pull out the screenshots.
I've never taken so many screenshots in my life as I have in the past 2 years. But okay, so you're, solo founder, builder, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're not like an engineer by trade, right? But having known you're like decently technical. Like, what has been your journey from, not being a software developer to now building entire products? Like how have you crafted that muscle? And a lot of it, I think, is just system thinking and back to like design thinking from like a technical perspective. How have you built that muscle over time? Because I feel like a lot of people see people building, but they feel like the gap's just too wide to get there, and it's just not anymore, frankly.
Do you mean like my journey into kind of the vibe coding, agent coding world, or just like over time?
Totally, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like vibe coding, or agentic development, if we want to call it that, whatever term you want to call it. But like you're building functioning systems and apps and web apps and things like that. So there's an element of having to know like how systems work, what an API is, what a function is, things like that. But then also the AI and agent covers a lot of that for you too. So like, what's that progression been learning to work with agents and this new kind of agentic development approach?
So I was always interested in computers and startups and websites specifically since I was 11. I used to tell this story to investors when they ask about your background. And I would tell them that my mother called the cops because she couldn't find me when I was 11 because I was in her office on her computer, like hacking games. And I was just like a script kiddie. I was just using people's bypasses and their creations, but I'd always been comfortable using tools that were digital and like messing around on my computer. And I built and sold websites on and off as like a side thing from 14 until 22 maybe. And I'd always been comfortable doing like integrations, and like all of that just felt very natural to me. I had tried to teach myself to code, like it must have been like 6 or 7 times. I bought courses. I went and did these like progression programs, and I just felt like the way it was taught was so, it just didn't click for me. And whenever I just sat down and did something myself and like treated it like some kind of play, it tended to work. And then I think 5 years ago now, I switched out of like a tech sales job into a finance job where I worked for a family office on their investment team. And I wanted to do a lot of like digital pushes and like help build them into a platform. And that wasn't their focus. And then I just got frustrated at some point and was like, I'm not going to kind of achieve what I want here. I might as well go do it myself. And I learned from a lot of the clients of that group, it was a multifamily office, like what that looks like. And then I went to Berlin. And if you're ever a little lost, don't go to Berlin. That's kind of a rough, a challenging place to be. And I met people for the first time through this program called Entrepreneur First, who were very kind of gifted technically, or they came from some kind of domain that was very specialized. So you had this mix of like operators and builders, and you do a little bit of like co-founder dating. You try and find your match in a way, and then they fund you with a bit of money to build out a company based on that idea. And around that time, they told us, don't do anything with AI. This is a fad. And
Really? What year was this?
This is 2022 going into 2023, right upon the release of GPT-3.
So right about ChatGPT.
Yeah. And everybody in this kind of cohort was like, these guys are crazy. Like we see the opportunity immediately. And 4 of the people who were in my program has sold companies. One of them for 90 million. Another one is his run rate is like 4 million a year. There were some small, but like those people all did super well. And there was so much knowledge sharing. So for me, it was this place where I could meet people who either became very technical or already had these skills and kind of immerse myself more into that world. And then I just saw the release of different tools. And the reason I started making videos was like, oh, I've learned to instruct a language model. I think it was like 3.5 Sonnet, or I can't remember the name, but it wasn't very good. But it was building basic applications. And I had like a 5-minute video. It was one of my first few posts, like with a piece of paper and a pen. This is how you build anything using AI. And like I made a few of those and they just really took off and worked. And the one thing I really wanted to focus on was, how do I teach myself more about like back-end engineering or like more kind of advanced topics as someone who isn't necessarily adept there. Like I've been very comfortable on front end and like libraries and kind of experimenting. So that was a new world. And I just told as like system prompts, teach me about the process, why. Yes. And then more and more, I just kind of picked it up and tried new things. And it's fun because you can just tell an agent to do anything, read all of the thinking, how it works. You have to grab the keys. Like it becomes very intuitive once you have this guidance. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning until now. And then I just got more into the design side because I felt like I understood what people might want through these like digital interactions. And then like the backend stuff, I'm not really that great. I rely a lot on learning from open source tooling, videos of people who like break concepts down, but I definitely run into a lot of issues still. So it's not perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your tools of choice or stack, either in building Resonant or just in general? Are you Cloud Code or Cursor, some mix between them?
Yeah. So my daily driver has been Claude Code using the Opus 4.6 model as of now. Mm-hmm. But I have to say, I've seen OpenAI as like evil corp for a long time, but I use their products, and I have to say that 5.4 is really good. So the first version of Resonant was a Frankenstein, and I built in all of these agentic capabilities, and it was just like everything and everywhere. And then I took the whole thing and I ran it in a Ralph loop, and I said, using Codex, I have made this mess of a project. Can you refactor it? And let's interview for like, 10 minutes before we get into the work. I'll explain everything and then port it over to Swift or Rust. And then I decided on the language. And it did it in, must have been 25, 30 minutes. And this was a massive code base. And I was just so blown away. So the language has not always been, like if I'm looking for something performant and it's on Apple, I'll use Swift or Rust. But if I want something that's just easy, my typical stack is Convex for the backend, Resend for all the emails, Next.js, ShadCN for design, and then Vercel for deployment, and then GitHub is attached. And that's kind of the suite, what I build on. No.
Yeah, I feel like people are taking notes right now. Vercel's so good too.
Yeah.
It just makes that whole process of deployment just like
It's so nice.
insanely easy. You know, and I've heard of how painful it was before. I'm glad I never experienced it. But so with Resonance, obviously it's voice dictation, the whole kind of, you know, secure component to it as well. But like, where do you see what's the vision of where this goes? Because you hinted at it a little bit earlier around the agentic side of things. Where do you see the future of where this product goes in a sense?
So it began as something I wanted for myself. And then I saw more opportunity, just as like, oh, this would be really nice if it also did this. And I spoke with a few hospitals and like people who work in medical staffing. And there's a lot of privacy components around that. So the original thinking was I will build my own private, local, on-device speech-to-text dictation tool. And then I connected it to text-to-speech and OpenClaw. And I was suddenly chatting with my computer and it felt super smooth and like tasks were being done for me. And I see this world where organizations will have these private workspaces for specific industries, ones that want to use speech to text, and you'll need to have as much context as possible. So in this case, everything you dictate into your computer, there's a log of that. I keep it on your device. I can't see it, access it, process it. It's all for you. And what actually happens is as you use more and more of the speech to text, you can begin to measure intent based on what applications did you jump through? What words did you correct? What was the difference between what you dictated and what was actually sent? So what did you actually mean? And if you look at those things over time, you start to have a journal or a log of what you're actually doing. And what that then becomes is essentially a map for your typical behaviors and what that can look like. So if I know that after you do coding tasks, you typically send a message or an email on Slack or to the client, whatever, I can actually start to prepare in the background. Hey, I know you're working on this project. I'm collecting all of the dictations that you made, or I'm seeing all the activity. Maybe I'll prepare an email in the background that you can then send off. So I'm almost proactively suggesting what you're about to do. And so that's definitely one component. The other is I would like to make this open source, and I want to be proud of the code base first, and make it easy for any teams who may want to adapt anything depending on how they want to use it. And if you look at the model from cal.com, they created this cool kind of effortless scheduling software. And organizations who want to do their own scheduling, again, they might be in medical, they might just be private, large organizations, depends on their preference. They will help you implement, set up the hosting, the services, and you can then own it yourself. And I think this area of owning it ourselves and not wanting to have to build the infrastructure for voice technology is definitely something I find interesting every day. And I get to kind of feel it myself how it's valuable. So if I can offer that as infrastructure and also build in agentic capabilities for those companies or users, I'm pretty happy because it feels like a natural extension.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I'm thinking about where it's going, at least so far.
Yeah, I love the proactive nature is so cool. And at the end of the day, when I talk to anybody that's new to this, context in my mind is the most important thing. With sufficient context, there's, no limit essentially to what you can do in my mind. I wonder too, like, I'm just thinking something triggered in my head from what you mentioned earlier. And it's that experience of dictating something, but then you got to go grab the link from wherever else, paste it in. You got to go take the screenshot, dump it in, get the file, dump it in. Like that would be really cool if that was just a seamless experience to where I could say, you know, like I'm prepping for this, right? And I dropped in your LinkedIn for context for the AI for prepping for the session. If I didn't have to actually go to LinkedIn and do the
Mm.
thing, or if like a screenshot of something I'm doing, like if it could take action based on your voice, and then you don't have to have this like mismatch within the flow. Um, yeah, that could be something
Yeah,
interesting
it's a nice reflection on like what you actually want your computer to do for you and what you want to be like
Mm.
hands off from. Because there's definitely things where I enjoy doing them and like it builds my own
Yeah,
the context in my brain, not just the words on the screen. And I need that for any kind of engagement. But there's some things where it's like it's a task. I can't be bothered to do it. I would rather just have it be completed for me. And if
yep,
it's surface, that's great. Or if I need to add in some kind of detail or just click confirm, like those are all things I would rather do.
yeah, totally. So the last thing I want to hit on, like I think this is a really cool story, and it ties back to like the audience you've built over time. But I remember chatting with you about this. You put a video out about Resonant, and it kind of blew up to a certain extent. But like, talk through that initial
Sure.
journey of building this thing. And I'm curious too, like your thoughts on this is kind of like in beta. It's free right now. How are you thinking about pricing, monetization? Like, what are those thoughts that go through your head as somebody that's bootstrapping and building this thing?
Sure. Um, I I started just messing around because I make videos on like sometimes I'm building something and I'll just show the process. And it started as that, and then I was using it and I was like, wow, it's kind of fast. And like, oh, I'm enjoying using this. Let me show people how it's done. And there's a few things in there's a few things I've learned in content. And one of them is like you need to show your hands. Like people for some reason
Mm-hmm.
build trust if they see your hands. So you should at least get the frame of like the hips up to the head. And then if
Yeah,
you can show something on screen for like seeing and saying, and you can make that link in people's minds, and then tell a story like, why does this matter? Or like, why should I use this? And like, I think a lot of the distribution nowadays for companies is like, how do you build trust? Because these programs are so capable, you want to know that you want to be able to trust the company. Um, so
totally.
I wanted to see how I could be kind of transparent about it. And I also wanted to offer something either free or open source, which could be a privacy focused alternative for the people who care about that. And there's a fine line there because if you offer something free, um, and you have costs on inference, for example, or for services, it becomes difficult because then you have a lost leader and you need to make money somewhere else. So my thinking right now has been, I'll run this in beta. I will give people free access. I will open people's minds to what it's like using a speech to text tool because it's not for everyone, um,
Yeah.
and kind of see what happens. And then I got a few requests for different features. And I realized after 5 weeks of trying to optimize at least my setup and an older laptop to see can I service these builds, doing inference on device, and the performance was just so poor. So I realized if I want to deliver an as good experience for the privacy focused people, I need to offer inference. So I need to do post processing somewhere else and bring the tux back. So I started doing that recently, and it's worked pretty well. But I'm doing one rebuild, and it's like 3 times faster. So I'm
Wow.
focusing on the stability and the performance, and then the people and the organizations who want to have, maybe they have their own medical dictionary within their organization, and they don't want that leaving the company for some reason. Or they have their own speech models in-house, they run their own AI models or their own servers. I don't know what the case is, but I can offer that as an extension to the application. So all they need to do is just put in an address and they can then have that support rather than going through the process of me running it for them. So everything still stays with them. So this line between what is free and how can I access everything great is usually for the people who are they don't care so much about data. They're kind of like maximalist about it. Like, take as much as you want, just give me the best experience. And then you have the people who have regulations, who need more control, or who just care about privacy. Maybe they have a home lab, I don't know what it is, and they want more customization to use those services from their own environment. And that is usually a case where there's either services or costs of time, whatever that needs to go in. And the other side, so there's kind of a middle gap in between and a range. I think I'm still defining that as well because I don't want to upset people, but I also want to make sure it's worth it on both sides. So it's, it's a delicate balance.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting journey for sure. But so where can people learn more about Resonance? And also, I think following along on the journey too, because like you are posting about this stuff, and I think people can learn a ton literally just by following you, see your process for building and the different things that you're trying out.
So the site is onresonant.com and it's free. You can try it out. It's on Mac. And then for the process or the journey, it's Source TMS. That's my handle on TikTok and on Instagram.
Nice. Awesome, Thomas. Well, thank you for talking some AI.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Talking AI podcast. If you enjoyed the show, give us a follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to leave us a review. We love those. For more info on Talking AI, visit talkingaipodcast.com. Quick break in the pod. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you've been thinking about how to actually use AI inside your business. And that's exactly why we built the AI Opportunity Finder. It's a free tool that helps you uncover high impact, tailored AI use cases based on your business, your goals, your pain points, and your industry. No fluff, no generic use cases, just real ideas that fit your business, and they're ranked by ROI potential. It takes about 3 minutes to run, and it's like having your own personal AI strategist for free. If you want to try it for free, check out the link in the show notes or go to hatchworks.com/AI-opportunity-finder.